It's an OECD requirement on levels of borrowing. John Smith explained to me once that it was quite easy to shift things around so they didn't appear as a national debt figure. And this was in the context of talking about housing. And indeed, until very recently, the enormous debts of Network Rail were not included as public sector debts, and PFI is not included as a public sector debt, which in reality is a public sector debt. Actually, look at it another way. What are they actually going to do about it if you go above their borrowing limit? The whole point, and the other point you're making is a good one, is that Maastricht, which the Tories supported, the Maastricht Treaty, was all about defeating the social Europe agenda and bringing the marketisation agenda and limiting of government expenditure by the 3% of GDP borrowing requirement. So that is part of that. The other side of the EU thing is that on the Railways Directive, I don't know if you've spoken about this before it came in, the Railways Directive in reality turns the whole of Europe into a privatised railway network, in the same way that the Postal Services Directive means we've got this mad situation where Royal Mail quite rightly have a postal service obligation to every property in the whole of the UK. I agree with that, I'm sure we all agree with that. TNT don't, and TNT can therefore undermine Royal Mail by the easy deliveries in the city and eventually either drive Royal Mail into the ground or persuade Parliament to lift the universal service obligation on Royal Mail in the same way that BT are trying to have their universal service obligation lifted for all households. So we've got a fight in our hands there. What's the prospect of winning some of this stuff? Well, what changes politics? It's public campaigning. What changes attitudes? It's forcing that debate on. So we can force the debate onto our ground, on health, on housing, on jobs, on wages, on living wage, and all that. If we don't say anything and don't propose anything, and if all that Chris Leslie can say is we're going to make different cuts, well, that's not going to inspire anybody to waltz down to the polling station. What will inspire people is if they feel there's going to be something better and more just in society, not necessarily for themselves, but for their children and for the worst off in our society. So it's a question of raising the size.
Thank you. I'll take.
I think we were talking to the IPPR, weren't we? And we were trying to find someone to write a report to counter the government proposals of a PPP on the London Underground, and which is how we found ourselves at the IPPR trying to do a job of persuasion. Because I had been round all of the major banks trying to get them to sign up to the idea, and the reason that they wouldn't write a report was because they wanted an in on the PFI deal if it came across. So we ended up, I think it was Alison Pollock actually, who's written a lot on PFI and the health insurance about that report. What is interesting is that report still, the report that we wrote saying why this is wrong, what the alternative financing mechanisms were, is still quoted. And that's, for me, that's one of the reasons why when Joe referred to campaigning, that's why it's so important, I think, to always go out there and make a noise. And I'm a campaigner, that's what I do for a living, and I'm quite a noisy campaigner. I think if you can go out there and you can create a noise, that is what the government starts to listen to, is public opposition to things, and we mustn't stop doing that and lose hope. And I think I read Chris Leslie's article as well, and it's kind of like, what would that make you get out of bed and go down and vote? When are we gonna? We need to offer some kind of hope, don't we? And I think the way that we do that is for people to be brave enough to stand up and say what they think and stand up for what they believe in. And unfortunately, I think our system of politics doesn't allow that to happen very easily. For those of you that were around me at the time, we were trying to get that letter into the Observer about rail ownership. I wasn't expecting it to make the front page of the Observer. I'm delighted that it did. And it caused a little bit of a stir amongst the Labour Party leadership. And, we had a lot of phone calls that evening to our house, and I was offered a slot on the Today programme, and it was suggested that perhaps it would be better if I didn't do the Today programme. And that was a real key moment for me, because I think that was a bit of a turning point, really. Either I gave in now, and after that, at what point do I really stand up for what I believe in? And here was a subject on which, after a few years in a a railway trade union, I actually felt quite certain of my facts. I was able to go and talk about this stuff, and I had people behind me, and I knew there was another 30 PPCs behind me. This was an opportunity to actually go out there and make a bit of a noise about something and put a marker down. And if I hadn't taken that opportunity, I think that would have been it, really. Why would I be doing this in the first place? I think it's easier at my age. When I'm 48, it's a lot easier, I think, to be going into Parliament, hopefully, being slightly older, because I think you're less scared off by things, because why are you going to bother to do anything like this if you're not going to go out there and stand up for what you believe in and make your mark? I think the people that I worry about are the people who maybe are a bit younger or are not used to being pushed around a little bit, who are going to struggle to stand up for things. And I hope that what we have achieved through the trade union strategy and their tremendous support for candidates like me is that we get a lot of like-minded people in, because the way we make that lasting change is to make that voice bigger in the Parliamentary Labour Party. That is how we do it. And to be bold enough to stand up there and say, you know what, I'm not going to change my mind. I'm going on that radio show because then everyone's going to hear that there are some of us in the Labour Party that think differently. And what that has done in a quite a short space of time is produce people who want to come and help in the campaigning ground. And as you know, Simeon, if we don't have those grassroots campaigners, if we're not going out there talking to our own neighbours, if we're not prepared to talk to people that live in our streets and knock on doors, then why are they going to come out? And I think if we look at the Green campaign that was run last time around, the turning point in winning that seat to them was doing that survey where they found out that people would go and vote Green if they thought their neighbours were going to vote Green too. They had to know they weren't going to waste their vote and let Tory in. And we were running our campaign on the basis, if you vote Green, you're going to let Tory in. So there was this kind of, this tension for people. They didn't want a Tory, that was certain, but which of us were they going to go for? And what the Greens did very successfully was run a very visible campaign. It was like a poster war for those people that were around in Brighton Pavilion at the time. And they made people feel safe about voting Green. And UKIP is starting to follow the same strategy. Where UKIP was successful, they've run a very visible campaign that made it clear that it was safe to vote UKIP. And we've got to be able to do the same thing. We have a base behind us that is 10 times more powerful than those minority parties. People know that we can form a government. That's a major factor in our favour. And people know that there are some good Labour MPs out there. They're more likely to get what they want from Labour. And we've just got to be brave enough now to take that next step and say something that is different and something that's radical, but also to be visible. We get out there with the rosettes on, we get the posters up and we talk to people. And if we do that, we can secure the seat. Certainly in Brighton County Town, I'm convinced of that. But also we can secure a Labour government.
Steve, do you want to say anything about those questions?
I mean, obviously, the kind of the politicians are more qualified to talk about these things more than me. But I'll just make because I've obviously come from a rail union where I worked before. I'll make a comment about the railways. And Jeremy mentioned the EU directives, and I think that can't stop us doing what we want in terms of railways in the UK. There was an EU directive that said you should have a separation of passenger operations and infrastructure, but basically you could get around that by creating separate accounting mechanisms. The latest EU directive does really promote privatised railways in Europe, open access. But other countries, they have ignored EU directives. If it comes to France and Germany, they know where their interests lie, and they aren't going to stand by and watch all their train manufacturing go. They're determined to hold on to it, and they've done that. So I mean, I think it's a question of kind of political will, and we can't let an EU directive stop us from doing what is clearly right, and which is the best thing in terms for also not only morally right, but also economically the case, which should be having a publicly owned railway. And the final point I think I'd make more generally is that how to win the case. Unfortunately, often moral arguments about it's right that it's publicly owned and not privatised won't wash with quite a lot of Labour ministers, and what you actually have to do is be able to demonstrate economically value for money for taxpayers is actually better off in the public sector. And if you do that, I think that that's the kind of key thing that can kind of get you over the line. And those who really ideologically on the real right of the party don't want to entertain it, they're really immediately on the back foot then, and you can win change. Yeah.
It's possible to actually save a great deal of money by taking services into public ownership. I mean, at a micro level in my borough council, over the past 4 years, we've taken housing, refuse collection, care contracts all back in-house, and they're all cheaper as a result of it. And they're all actually more efficient services as well. And they're also much more accountable because, as you well know, if you're a councillor or MP and you're dealing with a privatised service, you can get onto the council chief officer, you can get onto the person that's supposed to be monitoring the contract, and somewhere along the line you might get through to the company that hasn't done the work or should have done the repair that wasn't done. If it's a directly employed council employee, then it's much easier and they're much more accountable. And the same thing applies at a national level. And also, Steve's absolutely right that France and Germany in particular have, to a heavy extent, ignored a lot of the rail directives and just maintained a largely publicly owned service and invested far more in it. Okay, there was now quite big investment going in certain areas, but I just look back at the stupidity of past decisions. We're spending money reopening lines that were closed in my lifetime. You know? I remember my dad railing on about it. He said, "This is madness closing this line." We lived in Shropshire. Goodness knows how much money is going to be spent reopening it. You know, there's a lot of short-sighted decisions that were made, and they were made because it was claimed that British Rail lost very large sums of money. The reality was that British Rail actually managed to, despite all its underfunding and lack of investment, to deliver quite a comprehensive service, and had it been allowed to continue with its development work, such as the advanced passenger train which it developed, that was then knocked on the head by the government of the day, and we're instead importing the stuff from Italy to have Pendolino trains which use actually largely the same technology that British Rail Engineering had developed in the first place. And so let's be proud of public ownership and proud of what public ownership can achieve. And the first big campaign is on the East Coast Main Line of keeping that in public ownership and at least using that as a public ownership comparator against the private sector. The money is paid into the exchequer as opposed to the money that's not been paid in by the other private sector companies. And lastly, I'm so proud of Nancy and the other candidates for signing that letter, because John McDonnell and me writing a letter to the Observer saying the railways should be in public ownership is hardly news. In fact, the only news would be if we didn't write such a letter to it. But a group of 30 candidates who are normally put under the most amazing cosh by Labour Regional Office and Labour Head Office, sticking together and doing that letter, well done, fantastic. And all power to your elbow in doing that. And as you quite rightly say, if you have to deal with the Labour Party hierarchy for the first time, the second time they're a bit more cautious. Now, they can't believe me, I've been through this mill a few times. And what we do need is democracy within our party, policy making within our party, and MPs being accountable to their constituencies rather than to the patronage power of the party leader and the parliamentary party. Those are actually quite important changes that we need to fight for. And many of us, I'm looking around this room, didn't join this campaign for Labour Party democracy when it was set up in 1970 for nothing. We did it because we wanted our party to represent the aspirations of the poorest and majority working class population of this country, rather than become a tool of corporate interests, which is certainly almost became under Blair. We're gradually winning our party back, but we need to speed up the process.
Thank you.
So 38 Degrees do run very, very effective petitioning campaigns. The most effective was on forestry. I mean, I thought this sort of email stuff was a lot of nonsense, it wasn't going to work, until I'm sitting there in the library, which is a bit like an internet cafe in the House of Commons, and I'm sort of minding my own business, replying to my emails like this, and there's two Tories sitting on the other side. One saying, "Oh, Jesus Christ, more letters about these stupid forests. Whose daft idea was it to sell them off anyway?" Interesting. And then they got into a discussion about how irritating all these emails were. And And one of them said, I don't care about these bloody forests anyway, but everybody else seems to. I think we'll have to have a word with the government and stop it. Okay, all right, it worked. Yes, on the right of recall, it was a commitment that we made after the 2008 debacle over expenses and so on the right of recall. I voted for the private members' bill on the right of recall. I just think we should be slightly cautious about making sure the right of recall is on a limited area of issues such as criminal behaviour, that kind of thing, and not down the parallel of the US system. So I don't know if any of you've got long memories when Gray Davis was the governor of California. He was not the worst governor of any manner of means in the world. Arnie Schwarzenegger and the Republicans got a big petition going to have a recall referendum on Gray Davis, and the Democrat Party, instead of supporting Gray Davis, promptly dropped him and put up somebody else as the then losing candidate against Arnie Schwarzenegger as being the governor. And that was where a great deal of money was spent on trying to remove a governor who was doing things that were actually not all bad by any manner of means. And I think it should not just be based on the political popularity or unpopularity of a member at the time. Give you one other example. If at the height of the Falklands War issue, there had been a recall petition against Tam Dalyell in his constituency, I don't know what the result of that would have been. I don't know. I mean, maybe they would have supported him. I hope they would have done. But you know, with a big media campaign against him, you don't know. So I think, yes, a right of recall, but it's got to be on specific, discernible wrongdoings rather than just a general political disagreement with the person.
Great, can I